The film opens in the near future, and it is shown that biochemical weapons cause a disaster that makes the air unbreathable. The President of the United States announced to the nation that his government will do anything to guarantee their way of life and as well as their life's continuation. He assures them by saying that the safety of all Americans is their #1 priority. But citizens later found out that a disaster had occurred due to biochemical weapons and radiation, and it destroyed most of humanity, and the radiation and poisonous chemicals have made the air unbreathable. Due to this, the US government seems to have built some temporary shelters, and inside those shelters, some scientists are put into cryosleep. They are supposed to be put to until the air is no longer toxic. Each shelter is maintained by several workers, and these workers are also put to cryosleep but are awakened for 2 hours every 6 months. In these 2 hours they do their tasks and they manage the shelter, while also checking the radiation in the air. In the next sequence, we meet 2 workers in the facility named Bauer and Cartwright. Bauer, who just woke up and got out of the pod, is suffering nausea, but he recovers quickly, unlike Cartwright, who always wakes up with nightmares because of his. Bauer teases him for a while before finally letting him come out of his tank, which is a different model from the others. Bauer is an engineer by profession, and after getting better, he starts examining some computer displays in front of his colleagues. Cartwright also wakes up after this. The two go about their normal to-do list. During one wake cycle, they tested the radiation level of the air but found it was still toxic. Bauer and Cartwright also noticed that employees from other facilities had already checked in. However, it seems that communication between facilities is not possible. Their room has a board with pictures of their old life, and Bauer likes to put tape with the word dead on their friends' faces to remind themselves of the reality out there, but Cartwright hates it and removes the tape every time. Cartwright looks through some old photos of friends and family before Bauer reminds him that everyone's dead. Bauer then gave him some data to examine, but they soon learn that a seismic activity has occurred. Because of this, they go to check on other sleepers just to make sure everything is okay. Meanwhile, Cartwright looks at a photograph of his wife, Abby, and has a hallucination that she is beside him. This vision of his wife prompts him to talk to her, but Bauer is not pleased with this distraction. Cartwright believes that the sleepers are still alive and believe that they are the future of humanity. He even created a formula to determine how long they should sleep. According to his calculations, he predicts they may have to stay asleep for at least another 20 shifts. But Bauer doesn't like this. He thinks that they are wasting their lives to keep the sleeping ones alive. Just before 2 hours had passed, Cartwright's sleeping chamber unfortunately caught fire. Because of the recent seismic activity, he yelled for Bauer to get him a fire extinguisher. But by the time they managed to put out the fire, the sleeping pod was gone. And in the middle of all this, Bauer also injures his hand. Soon timer hits 0, and when the timer reaches 0, the lights turn off and the airflow stops. So they try to find a solution, and Cartwright read the manual with a flashlight, and he learns that if something goes wrong in the shelter, there is an emergency override, which is there to protect the people. The two are desperately looking for an emergency air source, and as they find the valve, they turn it on. They are waiting for the air supply to start, and in the meantime, they share their personal information. Bauer admitted to having a wife and 3 daughters, and because one of the conditions of the job was to be single, he chose to lie. After a short time, power was restored, the reserve air source was turned on, and the clock was reset for another 2 hours. Leaving aside the difficult discussion, they both go to the warehouse in search of a spare sleeping pod, but unfortunately, they did not find it. So they have to look for other storage facilities. With the help of the map, they walk to the basement even though Cartwright is severely claustrophobic. Fortunately, their hard work pays off as they can find a spare chamber, which they bring back to the facility and set up. When it's finished, Cartwright suggests that he should go to sleep first, in case there are any issues. However, he stalls for a few moments, so Bauer decides to go in instead. Just when the pod activates, Bauer hears a leaking sound and realizes that the air inside is thinning out. As Cartwright goes to check on it, Bauer desperately screams to be let out, but Cartwright doesn't hear him. Suddenly, the chamber malfunctions and sucks Bauer down, causing him to suffocate. He is about to die a painful death when Cartwright arrives in the nick of time and frees him by cutting him loose. However, in the process, he also destroys the chamber. Now that there are no other spare chambers in the facility, Bauer insists that they eject a random sleeping person to free up a chamber. Cartwright refuses, stating that they are obligated to look after those people and keep them alive. However, Bauer argues that they should prioritize their survival over others. Cartwright finally gives in and considers using morphine to euthanize one of the sleepers. But right then, he has another hallucination of Abby, who convinces him that there must be another way. Seeing his hesitation, Bauer decides to do it himself, but Cartwright stops him, saying that they are not murderers. This leads to a minor physical altercation, which ends after both of them get exhausted. Subsequently, they examine the blueprints and discover a code, ABC, that belongs to another facility. Cartwright believes that the ABC facility is adjacent to theirs and may contain spare parts. Hearing this, Bauer warns that reaching it would necessitate breaking the air seal, potentially releasing toxic air. The duo knows that the mission is a risky one, but it is something they have to complete. Hence, with no other options available, Cartwright dons a hazmat suit and exits the facility, with Bauer providing guidance over the radio. Along the way, Cartwright encounters a significant amount of blue dust, which Bauer identifies as an airborne impurity. The latter also fixes some cameras, which makes navigation easier for him. In the next scene, Cartwright finds the entrance to the sister facility but finds that the lock is jammed. However, with some advice from Bauer, he eventually manages to gain entry. Inside, he shockingly discovers that the facility has been inactive for a considerable time and that everyone there is deceased. This makes Cartwright hopeless about his chances of survival, but just then he has another illusion about Abby. She encouraged him to stay strong. She also tells him to hold on until the last breath, in hopes he might survive. Meanwhile, Bauer tells him to go to an air duct, which is located around 10 yards away. Cartwright was initially hesitant to enter the duct due to claustrophobia, but he has no other choice, so when he entered the duct, he comes across several corpses, which adds more difficulty to the situation and it becomes more challenging for him. In addition, as he moves further, the radio signal also begins to weaken, so Bauer tries to strengthen it. So he looks for the knife, but he is not able to find it at the place where he had put it. Instead of where he put it before, it's in his toolbox. This thing raises his suspicion, so he decides to check the video footage and determine how the knife ended up there. After reviewing the footage, he shockingly discovers that Cartwright was standing next to him the entire time when he was close to suffocating in the spare chamber. This thing suggests that he may intend to kill him but may have changed his mind at the last minute. Meanwhile, Cartwright sensed that something was wrong. Finally, he goes to the facility, and he starts looking around. The roof opens onto the surface of the planet, and as he looks out, he saw the city destroyed by a nuclear bomb. Cartwright assumes that it should have happened a long time ago. Later, while exploring the area, he discovered that all sleeping chambers were destroyed. Despite the computerized system reporting of all workers are alive and have been active in the facility in previous awakening cycle, it appears to be a decoy, which purpose is to keep them sane and make them believe they are not alone. Bauer, who is devastated by the video footage, expresses that the entire system is a lie and that no one can be trusted. Meanwhile, Cartwright also begins to believe they may be the only survivors. And as the air supply is getting low, he returned to his fecality. When he reaches the facility, he reaches the door and initiates the decontamination process. On the other side of the door, he saw Bauer holding the knife, so he asks him where he got the knife from. Now Cartwright realizes that Bauer knows the truth, so Cartwright asks him to let him because he wants to explain everything to Bauer. But Bauer doesn't trust him, and because of his betrayal of Cartwright, he becomes enraged and points a gun at Cartwright, accusing Cartwright of trying to do something horrible. Cartwright tried to kill him, and now Bauer also sees Cartwright as a threat to both himself and Sleeper. When Bauer refused to let Cartwright in, and as Cartwright is running out of air, he hurries back into the ABC facility. While running back, at one point Cartwright gets lost, and he can't find a way out. Simultaneously, he experiences another vision of his wife pointing him in the direction of an air duct. Meanwhile, Bauer berates him over the radio, accusing him of betrayal and trying to kill him. He also tells Cartwright that lies hurt him the most. However, Cartwright simply ignores him and continues on his way, which took him back to the facility. He takes off his protective gear and goes inside the building. As he heads for the facility's control room, Bauer stops him. He points a gun at Cartwright and threatens to shoot him. Cartwright, at once, immediately takes cover to protect himself and tried to convince Bauer. He starts emphasizing that they might be the only ones who are still alive. Despite this, Bauer doesn't listen to him and he continues to pursue Cartwright through the facility. Bauer claims that he can't let Cartwright go because he's afraid that Cartwright will kill him in his sleep. After a long chase, Cartwright managed to take refuge in the medical bay, where he obtains some morphine. He thinks of using it to murder his coworker, but then again, he starts having cold feet. While Cartwright is deliberating, Abby appears in front of him and urges him to kill Bauer or else he will. She convinces him that he must do it for them to be together in the future. So by following Abby's encouragement, Cartwright returns to the control room with the gas cylinder. But suddenly Bauer appears from behind and shoots him in the shoulder, because of which Cartwright falls on the ground. As Cartwright lay on the ground, bleeding, he shows the photo to Bauer and he begs for mercy. During this time he also starts to talk to Abby, but Bauer shouts that no one is there. While Bauer is distracted, Cartwright took advantage of this moment of distraction. Cartwright took the opportunity to attack Bauer, which results in Bauer dropping his gun. Cartwright took advantage of this opportunity and he flees to the control room before any more damage can be done. Meanwhile, Bauer picks up the photo and heads to the sleeping pod to find a similar photo. He realizes that Cartwright's wife is among the sleepers and that she is alive. Bauer threatens Cartwright and tells him to come out, or he will kill Cartwright's wife Abby. And as things get very shaky and his wife's life is at risk, Cartwright comes out and they both get into a fight and finally gains the upper hand by sneaking up on Bauer and injecting a large dose of morphine into him. Bauer turns around and points the gun at Cartwright, but he soon holds it down and drops it on the floor. As morphine begins to take over his body and Bauer accepts his fate and reconciles with Cartwright, he asks his colleague to take care of his wife before passing out forever. After this, Cartwright entered a sleep pod, and before falling into a cold sleep, he tells himself that he is the only one who can keep the place functional. In the end, after a time skip, Cartwright awakens to another cycle, but this time he looks decades older. The sleepers' pods also start to open, one by one, as the facility system automatically wakes them up. All of them exit their chambers and make their way to the Earth's surface, including Abby. The movie ends as Cartwright approaches his wife and they share a tearful embrace, finally reunited after all these years.